Well, hi, I'm Tracy Atfield with North Point Partners, and so glad that you're joining us today. I don't know about you, but sometimes we just feel like we're alone in ministry and we just have some questions and we're like, hey, like, what is the right thing for my church? Or what is the right thing for me to do with groups right now? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I've got two of my friends with me here, and they are from churches around the country. And so we're going to get to hear from them and hear kind of what questions are they asking themselves? And then what do they do with those answers? And honestly, I mean, I don't mean this as a spoiler alert, but sometimes we don't have the answers yet. We're still figuring it out. And I know that we will all tell you that. So, but I'd love for my friends to introduce themselves. We've got Lisa and Kevin with us. So Lisa, why don't you go first?
Yep. So I'm Lisa Alvino. I am the Grow Deep pastor at our church, Eastern Hills Community Church in Aurora, Colorado. So just a suburb right outside of Denver.
All right. Kevin, how about you?
And I'm Kevin Yoder. I'm pastor of adult engagement at Rivertown Community Church. We are a multi-site church in the Panhandle of Florida.
All right, great. And I've seen in the chat already that we have several people that aren't too far from where you guys are now, which is awesome. And then we have some from we've seen Canada and California, all over the place. So grateful for that. But as we get started, if you haven't already in the chat, please share where you're from. And also, I mean, just for fun, if you want to share maybe like your favorite quarantine snack or something like that, feel free, because, hey, we can all use some, I don't know about you, I feel like I have snacked plenty during quarantine. But anyway, tacos, nice. And yesterday was Cinco de Mayo. That's perfect.
Yes.
Well, good. Well, thanks. Just keep on sharing. We'd love to hear from you guys. But with Kevin and Lisa, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about like your church context, like your community, where you're at. So Kevin, why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about Rivertown and the area that you guys are?
So we are in the Panhandle of Florida, which many people know where Panama City Beach is. We're about 70 miles north of Panama City Beach, largely rural area. We have 4 campuses in the Panhandle and 1 in southern Alabama. And our churches range from 800 people average attendance on a Sunday, 550 people average, 250, and our youngest campus has 100 people average in attendance. And our area is largely rural. The county that I work in, serve in, our total population is 48,000 people. So we have a church of 800 in that county.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, and I love that because of your multiple campuses, you represent various sizes of churches that probably a lot of our listeners can really identify with. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Kevin. Lisa, how about you?
Yeah, so like I said, right outside of Denver, Aurora is a pretty big suburb. So we are in this affluent suburban area, have about 2,500 people that show up on the weekend, lots of families. And I think that would probably be our target, is kind of that double income working family.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for that. Well, and just with the two of you, we see like such a variety of churches, and how we do church is going to look different, right, in our communities. And I know even with all the COVID-19 stuff, different communities have responded in different ways, and people even within those communities are responding different ways. So as we're going to talk about that here in just a second, I would love, my friend Hayden is going to put up a poll, because we just want to hear from you guys. And here's kind of what is the feeling in your community around the pandemic. So a poll is going to pop up on your screen. So if you could just kind of quickly, in the next couple seconds, fill that out, we would appreciate it. So while they're filling that out, let's go ahead. And Kevin, I'd love to hear from you. Like, what's the feeling around your community that you guys are experiencing? And is that the same or different from what you're hearing from other areas?
So because we are largely rural, and a lot of and fairly conservative politically in our general community, so a lot of the concern is, hey, let's open back up business. Our small business owners are struggling, and enough of this shutdown. People need jobs. Let's get back to work. And so while that's the predominant voice, there's also the voice from the medical community, and the voice of people with underlying medical conditions in particular, or young families, where, wait, we don't need to be too quick about this. So we experience quite a bit of a dichotomy, but right now the voice is, hey, let's get people back to work, let's get the economy restarted, is the primary cultural message that's coming out of our community. So
How are you seeing about people wanting to gather? Are they interested in gathering, or are they still like, yeah, not so much yet?
There's some of both. In fact, just this morning, I talked to two different people in our church. One of them was, hey, are we meeting for church this Sunday? And the other one was, it's probably going to be several months till we can meet again. That would be wiser. So we're hearing both sides.
Okay. Yeah. A little bit of everything. Okay. Lisa, how about you?
Yeah, I would say we kind of share that same sentiment. At the beginning, it felt like people were really erring on the side of caution. I had a meeting with our superintendent yesterday, and he was saying that, our district was the first to close. We just felt like it was better to be on the safe side of everything. I think now we're seeing more and more people kind of angry and getting frustrated about being at home for so long. I think there was this idea that it was going to be maybe a week and then we would be back at it. And so 8 weeks later, still not really seeing an end in sight. We're starting to loosen up on some of those stay-at-home orders, but going into a safer at home. And I think people are starting to feel like home isn't actually safer. After 8 weeks, it doesn't feel like it's safe anymore. So just kind of feeling that tension of, I want to be safe and I want my family to be safe, but I am really sick and tired of this. And then there's the economic ramifications of everything as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting because I know Lynn commented on the poll of hard to answer as I see all three. And I think that's kind of what you guys shared as well. If it's like everybody's in different boats almost, of how they're feeling about it. It's interesting, from our poll, 64% said people don't seem to mind following the guidelines. So it's almost as a little bit of not necessarily that they want to, but it's a spirit of contentment kind of with where people are. And then 25% said they seem reluctant to follow the guidelines, and 12% they aren't following the guidelines. They're so over it. So I think we're kind of, we definitely see a little bit of all of that. Oh, goodness. Well, it's interesting because I feel like here in Atlanta, we're still just opening up. And so people are starting to venture out a little bit, but not much. I mean, the only thing people ventured out for, and it felt like everybody in our area ventured out for recently, was when the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds came through to do an air show, which was so inspiring and unifying. So we love that. But other than that, we haven't seen traffic or anything, people gathering until that event. When it felt like everybody, like I said, everybody in Atlanta came out for that. Well, thanks for just kind of sharing about your community and what that's like. So I'd love to know, like, in the context of your own community, and as you think about church, like, what questions have you guys been asking yourself or your staff been asking as you have responded to this pandemic?
Yeah, for us right away, what we asked was, what does our church community need right now? And then how can we best meet those needs in a completely unknown world? And so it was addressing people need community, they need connection, they need care, and they need, to a certain extent, some content. And so how can we get that out to people when we can't meet with them?
Okay. All right. And so what was there any action items that you guys did to kind of address those questions?
Yeah. So we actually completely reformatted the way that our staff was even set up. And so we had moved from Grow Deep, Reach Out, Partner with Families. Those were kind of our three buckets that we were doing ministry through, and went into this.
Real quick, can you say those three buckets again, just a touch slower?
Yes, I will say them slower. Reach out. So being a presence in the community, grow deep, growing spiritually, and then growing also in relationships with each other, and then partner with families. So how are we building relationships with families, but also helping families build relationships with each other? So those were where we were. And then we decided, you know what, we just need to restructure completely. And so we're going to move to helpful content. So what are we putting out there? Practical care. So how can we be still in the community, but really meeting people with the needs that they have? And then digital community. And so how are we going to help people stay connected in a time that would be so easy to feel isolated and alone?
Okay. As you guys redid your staff during that time, how did they respond? How did they handle kind of their normal thing not being their normal thing?
Right. Well, and we've talked about that a lot. Like if my job description were what I'm doing today, would I have applied for this job? I'm not sure. I'm not sure
We
what
call
none of
that
our
clause
staff would
number
have.
9 on our job description. If it's like everything else that needs to get done, that's all
Yes.
we're doing right now.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. But at the same time, there was this understanding of we have got to figure this out because we want our people to know that we care about them and that we're thinking about them and that we know they're there, and that we are meeting them just like we always have wanted to, right where they are. And so there was this feeling of I'll do whatever, however I have to do it to make sure that I am doing that for our community.
Okay, that's awesome. I love how quick you guys responded to adapt your staff because that's a really big change. And so to kind of go, hey, what are the needs? Let's figure it out with the resources that we have. So,
Yeah.
way to lead out on that.
Well, and I will say the hardest thing with that was that I was trying to lead a team of people that I didn't have a lot of relationship with beforehand. So then trying to build relationship, build trust, build some credibility with people so that we could lead out. And so it was tricky. And we're still kind of learning some of that as well.
Okay, that's great. Real quick, a question from Phil was, can Lisa say those 3 staff alignments again?
Yes, the new ones.
Why don't you do the old and the new?
I'll do it all. So the old ones were reach out, grow deep, and partner with families. And our new ones are practical care, helpful content, and digital community.
All right, thank you for sharing those. That's awesome. So Kevin, how about you guys with your church and your community?
Yeah, so one of the things, we are 4 campuses, and so we usually do one streamed service. The sermon is streamed live, but the teams all function independently and they are led locally. And so what we did is we realigned a lot of our staff responsibilities to work together as a team across campus lines. And so basically we're producing one service that is streamed digital, and our production, our band, our service producing from across campuses all came together to make that a great experience. And so we pooled resources there. And then on the other side, one of the things for us, we called it different than Lisa, but we are for our community. And so that outreach, what we had planned to do, we couldn't do anymore as mobilizing people in groups to go out and serve. So we had to mobilize to do that as individuals, caring for your neighbor, checking on your neighbors, doing things one-on-one with people, calling, and then the care side, we divided up names among our staff and calling everybody that we know that goes to our church and just checking on them and making sure that they are okay and they have what they need. And there's been some incredible conversations one-on-one with people out of those phone conversations. And so that's been a really good thing. And then the digital community, encouraging our groups to shift to Zoom or some other type of video connection for their small groups. So,
okay, that's great. I love just the consistency of the caring aspect and truly being the church. And I feel, and Kevin, as you said, of truly getting to be the church, like even on your street, in your neighborhood, yes. Whereas a lot of times you help mobilize teams that would go out, but now people are getting to literally love their neighbor in
yes.
a way. So yeah, that's great. Well, Kevin, you guys are not new to kind of crisis situations because you had Hurricane Michael come through in 2018 and it pretty much devastated your area. And as a church, you had to adapt, and again, you had the opportunity to love your community in a unique way. So tell us kind of how is, recovering from the hurricane, how does that compare to this pandemic that we're experiencing?
So, 18 months ago, Hurricane Michael came and devastated our community. We couldn't meet. We didn't have electricity in our buildings for 3 weeks. So that was the electricity part of it. And then, of course, other technology, internet stream, that was, come on. And we're still rebuilding from Hurricane Michael. So, but leading in that time of crisis, leading in crisis, it is really leadership that matters. And the similarities, and if you study, and I learned a whole new language around crisis and rebuilding from people that have experienced it before, but there's 6 stages of a crisis. There's and some of them are the honeymoon stage right after the impact. One of the first one's impact. And then the honeymoon stage where there's community cohesion and people coming together, and people and organizations just do heroic things to help meet needs. And that spirit of collaboration happen. And then there's this long slide of disillusionment that follows a disaster, of things not happening as quickly as what we thought they would, and the depression and the anxiety kicking in, and family tension and the blame. All that disillusionment kicks in, and then there's a rebuilding. So, some of the things I think are similar, that community cohesion, that heroic actions, we saw that. I mean, we saw restaurants just opening the doors and feeding kids lunch for free. And we saw people mobilizing and making masks, handmade, in their homes, making masks for people so that they have that protection, and people helping neighbors. I mean, that community cohesion, we hear about it all over the place, and that's common right after a crisis. So,
yeah, that's great. Is there any big differences that you've experienced from recovering from the hurricane versus?
So one of the big differences, impact after a hurricane, impact is about 6 hours long. In 6 hours, everything, all the impact happens, and then you're left to clean up the mess. I feel like with this pandemic, there's a cascading impact. We keep feeling the impact from it. And so when is the true impact really hit, I think, is what we're still asking. And so another one of the differences is with small businesses after the hurricane. As small businesses would open back up, there was like this community pride and celebration that people would do that. Now, sometimes a business opens up and there's this protest that happens. Oh, you're not being safe, and there's this criticism, and that all comes out of fear. So that's one of the differences, I would say. And then the community cohesion, we've seen some of that. But after a hurricane, people could gather. People came together to clear a road with chainsaws to clear a road. This one, we couldn't come together because we were supposed to practice social distancing. So we had to come together in other ways rather than physically coming together to work together to help meet needs. So that's some of the predominant differences that I would see.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there is a difference when in the hurricane you were able to work shoulder to shoulder. Whereas now people making masks are making them in their home,
yes,
and by themselves,
Right, and encouraged to work together, encouraged to get out, encouraged to be part of the effort. And now we're being told, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Or you're in trouble. Yeah.
Right. Wow. That's great. Well, thanks for just kind of sharing a little bit of that experience, and even having this 18 months after the hurricane impact. You guys are probably like, could we just catch a break?
Well, yeah, that's true. But at the same time, whenever people have survived something difficult, there's a choice to make you stronger. And so some of our community is more resilient and stronger because people realize, you know what, we can come back, we can survive, it will be okay. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great quality that you guys have had the opportunity to develop.
Yes.
For sure. Well, good. Well, let's kind of switch gears and talk about, for all of us, like we'd love to meet face to face in church, right? And I know I've seen a couple questions about, hey, when are your churches going to start meeting? And for all of us around the country, I think it's going to look different, Mm-hmm. So first off, we're going to have a poll pop up of when you anticipate your church opening, with some options there. So we're going to pull that poll up. But in the meantime, Lisa, I'd love for you to share about what are you guys thinking for your church? And then kind of what questions are you asking yourself as you even think of opening?
Yeah. So I think I said it earlier, on Friday, we're going to move from this stay-at-home order to this safer-at-home order. And so I think for a lot of people, they thought, okay, well, that means safer at home, but then also safer at church because that's an extension of my home. And my husband's he's our HR director, and he just keeps going to webinar after webinar after webinar. He was on with the governor a couple weeks ago, and the governor was saying, it's going to be kind of phased back in. So, groups of 10 kind of maybe on your street or whatever. And then we'll move to groups of 25 and then to 50, 100, 250. For a church where we're running 2,500 on the weekend, it just felt like that date kept getting pushed further and further back. And so my husband was like, I just started sweating because, you just don't know what that's going to look like or when that's going to be. And the governor then said, and this was all the church leaders, he said, even if you have a church of 250, let's think about how many entrances do you have? How can you safely get people into your building, socially distanced, in a way where they're with their family unit, but nobody else's family, too close and things like that. And then can you get them to a restroom safely? Can you get kids to stay where they need to be, not hugging and hanging out with their friends? And then same process going out for the next wave of people coming in. And so that made us stop and think the process of reopening could take a lot longer and look a lot different than maybe we had hoped or thought. And so for us now, it's how do we communicate to our church community, hey, your safety and your family safety remains our main priority. We want to be with you just as much as you want to be here with us, but we want you to be safe in the end. So still trying to figure out what that looks like. We'll probably take a lot of cues from the governor, but we'll also take a lot of cues from the school district around us as well. And just kind of looking at what are you guys doing to start opening up schools. And after that meeting with the superintendent yesterday, they have got some weird ideas, just trying to figure out how can we get kids here but keep them safe. And what if someone comes in the building and has it, then we'll just immediately shut down all like that school, but also the sibling schools. So the elementary school would affect the high school and the middle school. So looking at that, it just feels like we're in this for the long haul. And I don't know what that phase back will look like.
Okay. So it sounds like for y'all, you're really looking at what are the school systems doing, and that coming back with family ministry is important.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a church where I said, our target is that family. Yeah. And how do we, I feel like we could have some good rules for adults. I just don't know how that translates to little children.
I was joking with our son the other day of, I'm like, for kids' parties, they should put those like inflatable round, things around them. So it's like a donut. And then, that way they can't get too close to each other.
Yes.
Bounce off each other if you get too close.
How do you stop kids from like hugging each other? And
right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's interesting. But okay, well, great. Thanks for sharing, Lisa, where you guys are. So Kevin, how about you? What are you guys thinking? Because you're in a completely different context and you have multiple churches that are different sizes.
Yeah, and that is, in Florida, the governor just this week opened up like phase 1, where, again, gatherings of less than 10 people can happen with appropriate social distancing. And, some of the economic parts are coming back, but we're asking and having a lot of the same questions that Lisa described is, what really is the wise thing to do? And for us, it is, okay, so what do we value? Because you want to make decisions based on your values, not on pressure from certain sources. And so it is, and the governor has said, and local medical personnel said, you know what, we may have to shut regions back down because of an outbreak. And so until we see a little bit of a track record of what's going to happen with new cases, and I think that's what the government organizations are also trying to gradually open in phases, so we don't have to open and then we have to shut back down again. And so with us, less than 10 people, we're talking to small group leaders and saying, hey, as small groups, you can be the church. Every one of the spiritual gifts that God gave us can be exercised in your small group. You can be the church as a small group. So.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting because that's what we want, right? That's part of why we do groups is we want them to be mini churches around our area. And the church is just the people, that
is exactly right.
That's a building, but the church itself is actually the people that are in it. And we can do that with or without the actual building itself. But I understand we all miss it and we love it and we want to get back.
I think those of us as church leaders, we want to get back to meeting more than anybody else. And so it's it's something that I look forward to as a highlight of my week is gathering together as a large group. But when we can't do that, we can still be the church.
Yeah, that's great. Well, good. Well, it's interesting from our poll, we had the majority is June. June has 30%, so that's the highest. July, 25%. And then August, 18%. September or later is 23%. So June, July, September or later, August, and a couple are opening in May. So it's just interesting to see. And I think if we looked at where those votes were across the country, we could probably see some consistent themes, because I know some churches in Texas that are opening this month. We're really, Lisa, similar to you and Kevin, we're looking at the school system a lot and kind of going, when are parents going to be comfortable with their kids coming back to church? And how can we do that safely? So the idea of just, we want to err on the safe side of things than not. For us, kids go back to school at the beginning of August. So we're kind of shooting for around there, but holding that very loosely. And with the idea of before then, we would love to have, and I saw a question about this, some kind of smaller events, maybe leader training, gather leaders for encouragement, those kind of things, as well as, maybe groups could start meeting in person a little bit, So again, it's a lot, I think, Kevin, like you said, it's a little wait and see of what's going to happen as things reopen, because we don't want to go backwards, but we all want to be like, who's going to be the guinea pig and go first, So we're like, you try it and tell us how. So yeah, definitely. Well, great. Well, let's kind of switch to groups a little bit. Kevin, you brought this up before of you guys being for your community, and we can actually see it over your shoulder in the back there being, for you guys, that for idea. What do you guys, as you think about your community groups, want for your group leaders and your group members during this season? And is that the same, or has it changed with the pandemic? So Kevin, you want to share on that?
So what do we want for our group leaders? What we have tried to do is make sure that our group leaders are supported and that they get consistent and helpful information from us. And Lisa, you brought this up earlier about content and there was this push for us to, hey, we got to create content for our group leaders. And what we realized, and what our senior pastor said early on, hey, connection is more important than content. And so we've pushed really to connect and be available for leaders and to help support them, because they know their people best. And if we can give leaders that support and that connection, then we think that they're going to do a good job of giving that all the way out to their people. And so that's what we've wanted, is leaders to come out of this feeling like, hey, yeah, I was equipped with what I needed, but more than that, I was doing something consistent and something that mattered. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Lisa, anything different for y'all?
We just wanted to make sure that our leaders especially felt like we saw them, even though we can't connect with them in person, that we still saw them, that they still were valued, that we still appreciated them. And so that was kind of the big push at the beginning, because we felt the same way. If our leaders feel valued, if they feel seen, then they'll feel like they have the capacity to care for their group members. The other thing that we've kind of moved to a little bit is this idea of that the church is not, our pastor says, a service, it's servants. And so kind of driving home, we do the same, we're for Aurora. And so Thursday, we all wear our For Aurora shirts. And then sometimes we're for Aurora by going and supporting a local business and getting food to go or something. But sometimes we're for our community just by being home and staying safe. And so what does that look like? It looks different for different families, but that we can all come together and be for our community, but also in that we're able to serve not only those in our groups, but also our neighbors, and just kind of taking those blinders off that I think we all put on right away, and looking around a little bit more broadly and saying, hey, you know what, we actually see you too. Because I was seen, I'm able to see you.
That is great.
Very good.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Well, with groups right now, I would love to know, and even let's broaden it from groups to more of an idea of engagement, of people taking a step. what does engagement mean to you guys right now during this digital season?
So
Lisa,
we're really trying to drive people into short-term groups. So normally we would be pushing people into community groups. But right now what
pushing,
we're saying,
you mean like encouraging and letting them know it's best?
no, I mean like pushing, like pushing. If you're not doing that, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, of course. Encouraging people, if this is our best and first way to get connected is into a community group. But right now we just don't feel like that's the right place to be urging people to get connected. And so we've got a couple short-term groups that we started, and they vary from, there's a parenting group that's meeting that has breakout rooms based on different parenting ages and things like that. We've got Starting Point that's just very flexible at this point. We just kind of said, hey, you are familiar as leaders with the 8 weeks, but we don't know who's going to pop in and what they're going to need on any given Sunday. And so the fruit that we've actually seen from that, just being able to hop into a safe space and ask whatever question you have, has been really amazing. Work from home lunch hour, just an opportunity where people can pop in and pop out, just depending on if they're feeling the need to hang out with folks at lunch. But then we've also got we've called them Talk It Out groups we tried to do women and men just weren't interested in it, but for our women's groups have been really good. And it really is, hey, we're in this really strange time right now. Let's talk about it. And so this opportunity to talk about what's going on. And then we've also got an employment group where people that have been furloughed or have lost their jobs, they're able to get connected into that. And so it's kind of this mixture of care and community, but just like Kevin, like the focus is relationships. Content is what it is, and it's there, it's available, but people really, really want that connection more than anything.
Well, it sounds like with the topics that you are offering that they're felt needs of people right now.
Yes.
Or
at least what we perceive to be the felt need.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Yes. And if somebody knows what all those felt needs are, please put it in the chat.
Right.
Definitely. All right. Well, Kevin, what does it look like for you guys right now with steps to engagement? What are you thinking?
So, steps to engagement. We normally start some short-term groups for the summer. And so our normal calendar would have been that we start those up at the beginning of June. And so we are following that, thinking that as school ends, because honestly, many of our people have not been laid off from work other than if they worked in a restaurant industry or personal nail salon or hair salon. Most people are still working, but families have the added stress of schooling their kids as well. And so the perception we've had is people don't have time to add one more thing that they commit to, or they don't perceive they have time to do that. So we're thinking as school lets out, some of that people may be looking for that connection. So we're going to be doing a lot of the felt needs groups. We have a sermon discussion group. Will be a lot of talk about it, but kind of reflecting on the takeaways from the sermon on Sunday. Looking at some parenting groups. Financial is one that we believe is going to be a need this summer, but for sure this fall. But in the summer, we want to create some short-term opportunities for people to get in a group and connect. And like Lisa said, we think we know what those needs are, but so we'll see what the response is. So honestly, for us, the engagement piece with streaming services has been a challenge for us. I mean, we typically in our services do a connect card on our app and in paper during the service, and so we've tried it, continued on the app, and very few people are switching from Facebook, YouTube over to another platform to let us know, hey, we were here or we were new here or are making some kind of commitment. So that engagement piece, we've really found that to be a challenge. I don't think it's because people don't want to. I think it's because the digital platform is not conducive for them to do it easily. And many people, they're overwhelmed with figuring out how to do life and how to do family in this season. So,
very true, for sure. Well, good. Well, one of the questions that I saw come in kind of goes into our next section here. So we are going to invite Christine Birch who had a question, and I'd love for her if she's willing to jump on with us today. So I know our folks behind the scenes will kind of help to make that happen. But in the meantime of that, of Christine coming on. Oh, there she is. Yay. So great. Christine, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Before we get to your question, we want to do a poll real quick. I know, Lisa, you mentioned this just a second ago about kind of the women were engaging, but men weren't. And I think we're seeing across our churches, there's different pockets of people who are engaging and some who are not. So there's a pull up of who is the most likely to connect in digital community at your church. And so we're just curious to see who's connecting, and we will actually be able to see by the who doesn't get the votes of who's not connecting. So if y'all can share that, that would be great. But Christine, welcome. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your church and where you're from?
Sure. So I work at Connexus Church just north of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. And we are 3 locations, approximately 1,200 across those 3 on a weekend. And got a good chunk of adults in groups, which has been great. They've transitioned pretty decently to online platforms. And I would say, all but 7% or so are making it work. So that's good news. One of the things I've been thinking about, I'm curious what you guys think, is I know personally as a group leader, my group is due to multiply this fall. And I don't feel like we're going to be able to end well in this season. And I'm curious what you guys think about encouraging all of our groups that are due to multiply this upcoming season, to wait until the winter.
And real quick, Christine, as you say multiply, describe a little bit of what that means, because all churches have different models. And so within your church model, what does that look like?
Yeah, so ideally what that means is that our groups aren't, if there's 5 couples in a group, they're not necessarily going in 5 different directions to a new group. Ideally, there's an apprentice leader that's been developed, and they'll take half of the group and open up some new seats over here. And then us as the current leaders would also go take half of the group and open up some new seats over here for hopefully new people that have joined our church since the last group launch. So a couple things, like when you're talking about engagement, it's like, well, will we have those new guests that we actually know that are looking for traditional community groups in this fall? Can we launch group? This is similar, or related, but different. Will we be able to launch kind of traditional community groups when we're launching them initially online? And then does it make sense to just pause the multiplication that we were hoping for this fall?
Okay. And one other clarifying question. For your church, if you had to answer the poll of when you think that you might open, which we all know that that's a complete unknown at this point, but for Europe and Canada, what are you guys experiencing?
Yeah, my gut says that we won't be opening until the fall or later. Ironically, one of our locations will probably be able to open earlier than others, but like you guys mentioned, I don't see how it's going to be possible from my kids' ministry point of view. And 2 of our locations meet in theaters, so who knows when they will open. We might not even have the option to meet in our traditional locations. So I would say fall, like I'm dreaming about our groups meeting on Sundays and doing watch parties together at some point. We'll see.
Okay, great. So thanks for providing that context, because I think that helps, like in thinking through the question a little bit. And as we've said, we don't have any right answers. We probably have some questions to go, what about? So yeah, Lisa or Kevin, either one of you guys want to jump in on that?
So, Christine, one of the things, talking about a crisis, and I heard this statement recently, I don't remember where, but in a crisis, we need consistent relationships. And so I'm encouraging leaders, hey, don't multiply right now in a crisis, so that people that have learned to trust and walk through the journey with you, they can continue to support each other. And so that's one thing that I would say is, in a crisis, continuity is important.
We've said the same thing. Caveat, my concern is when you've gone through a crisis together, there is a bond that is very, very tight. And so my concern is, will those groups then ever feel comfortable multiplying now, having had this bond and this kind of seal that nobody else experienced outside? They went through it together as their group. How could they possibly think of bringing someone else in or not being together through this? So that's my concern. But just like Kevin said, we've said the same thing. Just now is not the time. Let's get through this. And then I just think we're going to have a lot of really hard conversations on the other side of it, to almost recast that vision of why we multiply and why that matters, and that there are people that actually suffered this crisis on the outside of community, and we do want to be able to provide safe places for them to heal on the other side.
And one of the things we've talked about in Multiply, a lot of times a healthy multiplication for us is when a leader who's mature and experienced comes out of the group, turns it over to an apprentice that's trained, and most of the people continue on in the group, but that leader comes out and helps create another community for people who need to be in community. And so I think that might be a way this fall or in the winter to help create spaces for new people in community to happen in a healthy way. So.
Yeah. And so from what Kevin just said, Christine, I hear that you and your husband should kind of step out and no, I'm just kidding.
That's what I was hearing too. I was like, wait, now that's not what I was hoping for.
But he also said in crisis to stick together. So,
Yes.
but no, again, I think both of those are incredibly wise. And I mean, what you guys shared, I agree with. My thought, if I was in your shoes and just thinking of groups where they're at right now, of that idea of ending well and letting them probably continue through December, so they kind of stick together during this time. But again, I think we're all thinking, and I know we've had some questions about this, what do you do with people who aren't in community?
Yes.
Because we want them to have a spot to join and for them to connect with people. And I think we're also asking, are people going to connect into digital community? Is that a first step for people? And so, kind of do we need a smaller step? I think those are some questions that we're asking of, like, if we were asking them to connect into digital initially, would they need a smaller step first, more like a felt need study, a short-term group, and then hopefully those relationships could then continue into a longer-term community. And right now, we're hoping that we could launch groups, more in-person groups in August, which is our normal launch time. So I think that's what we're shooting for, and that could change. But I know, like, in your context in Canada, that might be different, So yeah, any other thoughts on those questions?
Well, and Tracy, one of the things about digital community in rural settings, in our setting, many parts of our community don't have reliable connection, don't have reliable service. And so there's people who want to be in digital community, but can't because they don't have the internet connection to do so. And so we're having to figure out how to bridge that gap. And it's a reality that we're having to deal with. And I would guess there's other churches in rural communities. Christine, you're shaking your head. Yeah, that's a limiting factor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how have you guys handled that then, if kind of with internet instability or inability to get?
So I did a poll for our group leaders. What's been the best way to connect people relationally during this season? And the number one response I got from group leaders was group texting. That were ranked higher than Zoom calls or video calls. And so part of that, I think, is because of that digital divide, we call it in the rural setting, of people who have connection, people who don't have connection. So.
Okay. All right. That's great. Well, Christine, thanks for joining us and asking that question, because I think those are questions that we're all asking as well. So we appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, as you guys think about community, what other questions do you feel like you're asking these days?
So we did the same thing. We've reached out. We're actually on our second round right now of calling our community. And one of the things that we're asking now is, like, what do you need? What is missing? It's almost at what is missing from from your experience right now. And it's giving us an opportunity not only to tell them about different ways that we can provide care for them, those very practical, if you need food, if you need other items, a way to provide those for people, but also sharing with them the ways that we have for people to get connected into these digital communities. And I know it's not ideal, and I know it's not amazing, and I know it's not what everyone needs, but for people to know that it's available. And some of our short-term groups that I was talking about, some of them, they kind of open up and they close because we need them to be able to build that, but then some of them are open and they're just available. And so that people have a place that they can pop into and pop out as the need arises or as they feel like they need that. I think that's been helpful for some individuals that are a little more hesitant to get involved in something more long-term. Even 3 to 4 weeks feels long term right now. And so that they know that they can hop on a Tuesday afternoon and just hang out with some people for lunch. That's been really good for those people where that's their need. So it's again kind of meeting people where they are with what we have. And sadly, Zoom is what we have.
True. And it's funny, even as you say that about like 3 to 4 weeks feels like such a long time right now, because we're in a phase of we're like, hey, the governor is going to be making an announcement tomorrow. So we're all waiting for what that announcement's going to be. And that's just not normal. No, we're not used to that. And so we're all still trying to kind of figure out, how do you live in this world that is so much more day to day? And we know that we should live a little bit more day to day and not as planned and calendared and, in control ourselves. That's how I think one thing I've learned is that I really like control and I like planning. And this has shown me that I need to loosen my fingers a little bit on that. But I think we're all just getting used to that idea. We can't plan right now, super far out, but yet we do need a plan.
Right.
So It's like balancing that tension, I feel like. Well, what about spiritual growth? Because we've kind of talked a lot about the relational and the connection piece, which is very important during this season. But Kevin, I know you had some great thoughts when it kind of around spiritual growth.
One of the conversations we're having is, so what is the church's responsibility in spiritual growth? What is the group leader's responsibility in spiritual growth? What is the individual's responsibility? And I know North Point has done some great conversation starters on that very topic. But what is an individual's personal responsibility? I know I was talking to one of our parents the other day, and they talked about the incredible spiritual conversations they're having in their home almost daily during this season. And I was like, that's great. That's what our responsibility is as parents. Very oftentimes there's a tendency to see it, I'm going to take my kids to church on Sunday, and that's the church's responsibility. And so I think that personal responsibility for my own spiritual growth and the personal responsibility for my family's spiritual growth, my family's health, I think we can have some conversations about helpful conversations for people of what they can do to help their own spiritual growth. And a lot of those have to be one-on-one. It's not the same message you would say to 500 people. It has to happen in those smaller one-on-one conversations. Yeah,
and I've had that. I've kind of wrestled with that myself. What is our responsibility and what is your responsibility? And we don't need to get into how I feel about some things, but one of the things that we have used this opportunity to do is my pastor approached me at the very beginning of all of this, and he said, what if this was a time where we could teach people how to study their Bibles? What if we could come alongside them in a way and teach them how to do that and help them build in this rhythm of Bible study? And so every morning he and I are doing a Facebook Live together, and we are walking through. We started in the book of Philippians, and now we're finishing up Ephesians this week, but walking verse by verse, almost word by word, and helping people develop this rhythm of what it looks like to pray, read, study, reflect, and journal. And so it's been so amazing. And one of the things that I had shared earlier with Tracy and Kevin is this community was formed in a Facebook chat. And it's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. These people a lot of them have never met. Some of them are joining us from out of the state. And yet they're having these side conversations as we're digging into the text. They're asking us questions, they're commenting on each other's stuff. And it's just amazing to watch. Today we had so many prayer requests come in. And this was just in addition to, we hadn't necessarily asked for it, but so excited because I feel like when people are starting to ask for prayer, it's this new level of trust that they have built with this community. And so we call it daily time with God. And so we're trying to figure out, what does this look like when kids do go back to school, when we do have 8 a.m. meetings again? Like, is this something now that people are dependent on us for, or is this really truly meeting that need of teaching people how to build in this rhythm on their own? And we talk about it all the time, that this is not in replacement of your Bible study. This is a supplement to. So we're trying to use language to where people don't become dependent on that. But we also want people to be able to look back on this time and say, I built something that became a foundation of my faith while I was in quarantine.
Yes.
Wow. What a great opportunity for people. And I love that you're asking the question of, okay, so what does this look like going forward? Because there have been so many great initiatives started during this time. And I think we're even asking that with groups of, well, what about groups meeting digitally instead of in person? And like, what do you guys think about that?
I think it'll end up being a little bit of both. I've told my community team, everything we're doing today will carry forward. We will never go back to 100% in person. We will never go back to 100% in a building or in a group, face to face. I think it will become a hybrid of a little bit of both. And I don't know if people will be so digitally fatigued on the other side of this that they won't want to do a Zoom call ever again, or if people have figured out that this is actually a really safe place where I can actually meet people, build some relationship with people before I have to go to their home or kind of get fully invested. So I don't want people to kind of dip their toes in too long, but at the same time, did we find a way where people will feel a little more safer getting started?
I think I agree with you that, Lisa, that for some people, it's like they jumped over the hurdle of learning a new technology, and now they're realizing, oh, this could apply when I'm traveling. I could check in with my group when I'm traveling, or if I'm homesick, I could still join part of the group meeting for that. But then there'll also be some groups that will be digital, but I still think we long for that in-person connection most of the time. And that as soon as what we are able to, most groups will start back to that, but not all.
I was asking the other day, I was like, I hope people realize the last couple of years when I've been up on stage, I'm not blowing smoke, that we're built for community. We are actually built to be together and to do life together.
Yeah. And we say, too, we are a church of small groups, not a church with small groups. And, okay, we're living that out right now in this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. Well, our time is almost up here. So do you guys, any last questions that you guys feel like you're either asking as it relates specifically to groups or to your church staff or your church? Just want to make sure, give you an opportunity to go, okay, open floor.
You know, I think the first question on all of our attendees' mind, when can we gather in person? But I think there's a whole series of questions we as church leaders need to be asking before we answer that question. And Lisa, you brought up some great conversations already in that. But so the one that I would add to that is, so what is our way of engaging people back in, and of our teams, people that used to have a habit of showing up every Sunday with a heart to serve? You know, how do we get that back? And people that was a value to them, will they continue to value that? So, and I think it's all about connecting with people as we're able and helping remind of why engaging is important to their own spiritual growth. Not what the church needs, but it's important for them. So.
Yeah. Wow. That's good.
And Kevin had asked this a couple of days ago, but he asked, where do you draw the line between safety and experience? And I've brought that to every meeting that I've been to since then, because it's so good to remember that, our goal is to keep people safe, but at what point does that compromise the experience? And so just kind of, again, that tension between what's the right move.
Yeah, and that quote, Dan Ryland wrote about it this last week, and you can look it up on his blog, but that's been, and it comes back to what do we value? And we need to make decisions based on what we value and what parts of our experience do we value so much that we are not going to compromise on them. So.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and I think we're continually asking, what is the wise thing to do?
Yes.
And that it's a state of dependence, too, because we don't know exactly. We don't have a crystal ball that tells us what we should do. So it's just that continual dependence that I feel like we have on the Lord, which is exactly where we should be.
Mm-hmm.
And
it
ask
is.
Him, please guide us in this. Help us to be wise. And sometimes those wise decisions might not be what the majority of people want. And that's hard because we really like to please the people in our church, but they might be the best thing. And so that's it's an interesting place to be.
I think that surrender and that humility of us, we've got to lead, but do it in a posture of, you know what, I could be wrong, but I'm trying to do the wise thing. And that is a posture that people want to follow.
And I think people want to hear we're learning too. We're figuring out too. We don't have all the answers. Man, I wish we did, but we just don't know. And so as people are living day by day, our churches are living day by day.
That is true. I hope that wasn't a secret to any of you listening to this. Hopefully that's not a surprise.
Right? Hopefully that was meant to be encouraging. Okay.
Yes.
Right? Absolutely. Well, thanks, Kevin and Lisa. Appreciate y'all joining us today. And also thanks to everybody who has been listening to the webinar today. And we just hope that it has been helpful. And I know in 2 weeks, we will be having another Wednesday webinar. And so not next week, but 2 weeks from now. And the cool thing is you get to help determine what the content of that talk is what that webinar content is going to be. So you will receive in your email you'll receive in your inbox a survey. And so if you complete that, we're going to use that information to go, hey, what do people need? And so that will be, we'll use that for that content. And don't forget that some of these topics that we're talking about are also going to be covered during the Regroup 2020 conference that's going to be in July. And that's going to be a digital conference. It's an online conference about small groups. There's going to be keynotes, master classes, live Q&As, all that good stuff. And it's $20 a person. So feel free to check out regroup.org. And we'd love for you to go check out that site to kind of learn a little bit more. And just thanks so much for joining us today. And we hope that you have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.